I already knew how to say Assalamu alaikum, but I didn't know how to say this. मैं पाकिस्तान आया हो जिसकी मुझे बहुत खुशी है. Now, it's great to be in Pakistan, actually, because I haven't been for quite a few years, maybe up to 4 years, before the pandemic, a long time ago. And the wonderful thing about Pakistan is the dedication of all of you to your children's education, and the real commitment to building an education system and to building education for your children, which gives them a passport into their lives going forward. Now, back in September 2022, I gave a presentation a little bit like this to the Cambridge Schools Conference in Cambridge. And they asked me to talk about positive schools. And I think they asked me because the pandemic has been a pandemic, and Uzma referred to some of the real challenges it gave us, but also some of the opportunities it gave us. And to stand and to reflect and to take stock and to look forward is something they wanted me to do. I should say that that doesn't stop us looking backward, because we've all been through different things in the pandemic, and all of those things should be acknowledged, as Uzma did, and should be talked about. But today we're going to try to be pointing forward. We're going to look into the next few years, and we're going to think about what makes positive teachers, positive students, and positive classrooms. So when a school provides a positive learning environment, it's quite important to know how to recognize it. So what would you see? Well, if I think about what I'd see something like this. I'd see this girl here. She's absorbed in her role. She's really focused. I think she's got some intrinsic motivation, because she's not talking, she's just concentrating. And around her, I can see this boy here also concentrating, and I can see this young man here also really focused. So if that classroom is a positive classroom, if those students are positive students, then I can see focus, I can see concentration, I can see structure, I can see motivation. Now, I've got some more pictures I'm going to ask you. And I probably will simply take hands, so I'm going to change the slide. A new picture will come up. If you'd like to say one word to describe what you see, you're not allowed more, one word, then put up your hand. I have to come closer. Okay, what do you see? Who wants to say? Yes, madam. Enjoyment. We've got enjoyment. Okay, next picture. What do you see? Teamwork. Oh, teamwork, absolutely. Next picture. What do you see? Oh, let me come here. Tell me that again. We've got collaboration. There's another word over here. Facilitation. Engagement. Okay, next picture. What do you see? Focus and concentration. Observation, and real focus observation. Ooh, let's see if that's a test. Stay calm for a moment. I'm looking at my colleagues. The reassuring thing is that no one's running in a panic, shouting, "Get out quick!" So we should be all right. We've got focus, we've got observation. One more word for this one. Exploration. Exploration, you're quite right. This one, what do you see? Celebration. Interaction. Passion. Sharing. Communication. I love this boy. What do you see in this boy? Focus and concentration, absolutely. And in this girl? Involvement, engagement, commitment. And here? Group activities, they're working together. Yes, madam. Discussion. Collaboration again. And actually, you've missed something there. What's he doing? He's happy. He's happy. He's smiling. And then next one. What about this girl? I love this girl. We've got some sportsmanship, maybe, yeah. They're building their skills, good, and they're building them in a structured environment. Look at how organised it is. The teacher here, giving commands, the girl's waiting their turn. This girl, really concentrating. Look at her face. That is a face of focus. We're going to come back to that face later. And then final one, I think, maybe penultimate. Yeah. Guiding, facilitation, curiosity, hands-on, absolutely, wonderful. So let's just have a little think about the words you've used. You've said joy, collaboration, focus, concentration, structure, group work, working together, enjoyment, smiling. All of those words are actually indicators of something called engagement. Now, engagement isn't just what we think it is. Engagement is actually a psychological construct. And it's got 3 different parts. So one of them is behavioral engagement, and that's a lot of what we saw, the active participation and involvement of the student in social groups, classroom interaction, study, and extracurricular activities. Let's look to see what we saw. We saw engagement in extracurricular activities. We saw engagement with your peers in a social group. We saw engagement with work, working together, but still working and engaged in the academic work they had. Then cognitive engagement, the student's personal investment in learning activities, including taking responsibility for their learning, commitment to mastery learning, and the use of studying strategies. Look at her. That says that cognitive engagement straight. Personal investment, including the use of studying strategies. She's on her own, she's in the library, she's got a computer, she's got a textbook, she's got the focus. She is invested in the work that she is doing. Look at him. He is absolutely on focus. There's nothing about that face that says disengagement. Everything about that face says cognitive engagement. It's in a very traditional classroom. He's in a row. He's been talked at, but he's really focused. And then finally, emotional engagement, including enjoyment, support, belonging, and attitudes towards teachers, peers, learning, and schools in general. I love this picture. You got teamwork straight away, all of you just went, teamwork! But look at the sense of togetherness there. Yeah, we can do it. The sense of belonging, the sense of mutual obligation to each other. And then this is lovely. This is actually a teacher and a daughter. Sorry, a teacher and a child. It looks like a mum and a daughter. It looks like a mum and a daughter because they're so together. Their hair is almost touching. Her hand is touching her hand. There's somebody in a previous session said there's love in that picture. And it really does look like it. They really are having fun together. They're learning together. And the teacher here is playing along in order to help the child to build their playing skills. And look, emotional engagement again. So if we're going to do that with our students, can we apply these definitions to our teachers? Because you are principals and you have 2 responsibilities, both your teachers and your students. So let's look. The active participation and involvement of a teacher in social groups, classroom interactions, study, and extracurricular activities related to school. Yes, we can, can't we? If you have teachers who are attending Friday night football club, going out with peers for a cup of tea after school, for example, we have them in those extracurricular activities. If you have a teaching and learning group in your school for teachers, then you've got that behavioural engagement again. If you know those teachers who stay late, who are always in the staff room, always offering wise words to younger staff, you've got that behavioural engagement again. So let's think about our teachers as being engaged. Cognitive engagement, the teacher's personal investment in learning and professional development activities, including taking responsibility for their learning, the commitment to mastery learning, and reflection on their teaching. You're all here because you're committed to your own professional development. You send your teachers to courses that I've done here because you're committed to their professional development, and so are they. And so that cognitive engagement in your own practice as a teacher is really important to build your own sense of competence as a teacher, but also for your students' learning. And then finally, emotional engagement, including enjoyment, support, belonging, and attitudes towards students, peers, who are teachers, learning, and schools in general. When you walk into classes in your schools, think about those classes that you enjoy the most. When I used to walk into classes in my department, the best ones were the ones where I couldn't see the teacher. And the reason for that was because they were working directly with the students. They were out and about in the environment of the classroom, frantically building children's learning, not just sat at the front doing their marking, not just sat at the front doing something while the children worked, not just stood at the front talking, but that really lovely sense of industry and buzz which was happening in that class. So remember where we started? We started at positive schools, positive teachers, positive classrooms. So how do we get that? Well, you've told me that we get that through making sure engagement is high. But if we want high engagement, then actually we have to have high motivation too. And motivation and engagement are two slightly different things. And we're going to talk about motivation now. So I'm going to say a few words, and I'm going to take you on a journey through motivational theory. Forget the things at the top if you don't want to look at the theory and you just want to listen. But my first challenge to you is to think, is your school and is the discourse in school, are your conversations in school all about students' grades? Because if they are, then you may be doing a disservice to some of your children's self-worth. It's okay if you're a student who tries hard and then succeeds, i.e., it's okay for those students who won all the awards because they have reward from those grades and it makes them feel worthy. It gives them self-worth. It's fantastic. It was good for me at school. I got great grades. It was brilliant for my daughter. She got fantastic grades. But it's not necessarily good for this girl because she's tried really hard and then she's got bad grades. And so her sense of self-worth goes down if that's the only way in which you measure self-worth in your school. If all of the conversation is about grades, then that's what people will care about, that's what makes them feel worthy. And the consequences of her getting those poor grades is that she'll feel ashamed. She'll feel ashamed of her failure and her engagement will reduce. So how can we widen the ways in which in our schools we give students more self-worth to make those schools more positive? Well, we can try to provide extracurricular opportunities where they can gain much better self-worth. So for example, playing instruments, playing sports, playing in clubs, gives them a sense together that they've got a worth to each other, i.e. if you're playing violin, I'm playing trumpet, I need you and you need me, and we depend on each other. If we succeed in a sporting activity instead of in an academic activity, again we get more self-worth. But we also do that through curricular diversity. Uzma talked about music and arts as being important and how she really wants those for her children. I think we should all want those for our children because it gives a different way in which to get that worth, to measure your worthiness against each other. And finally, think to yourselves again, how much in your schools do you think about children's friendships and mutual support when you make your policy decisions? Do you mix your tutor groups up constantly, stopping children forming those friendships? Now, that's self-worth, that's about the whole person. But you'll have heard people say this before. Something like, I'm really good at science, or I'm not very good at science. That's about their feeling of efficacy in one particular subject. And so, in this case, we've got two things going on. We've got, go a bit closer. There we we've got what they think about their capability. I'm good at science, or I'm not good at science. And then we've got a kind of measure of it. I'm really good at science, or I'm not very good at science. Oh, let's come back again. There we are. So if we're trying to counter this idea that people are good at subjects or not good at subjects, first of all, why do we need to do it? Well, if I think I'm not very good at science, I'm not going to try. And therefore I'm going to be disengaged, and therefore my classroom is not going to be a positive classroom. So how do I get this sense in a student that they are good at something? Well, I need to think my way into a student's head. I need to think, where is their starting point? And I need to plan accordingly for that individual learning. And so that might be simply getting the student to focus on the topic, getting them curious, making sure I understand their gaps or misconceptions, helping them to think about their learning, teaching them how to think and reason in my subject, and getting them to reflect on their learning, ensuring that everybody is just challenged to the right amount. What a cognitive scientist would say is experiencing a desirable difficulty. Then I need to check my understanding and assess and evaluate. It sounds really simple, but it's planning for all that with an individual child in mind. It's planning for all that so that I can see that child who's got that lower self-efficacy really feeling like they can do it, starting in the right place, starting where they're starting, and building them really gently upwards. You can also do it, of course, by adapting their activities and questions, getting them then to think through things from those starting points step by step. And you'll have seen something like this before, where you've got moderately easy tasks at the top, rather more challenging tasks down at the bottom, and using command words like that accordingly. And here's an example. So it's from biology. So locate the xylem is quite straightforward. Describe its structure, still something anybody can do. And then build a model, compare your model, predict what would happen, write a critique. The level of challenge and level of demand in those commands increases slowly but surely as you go through the tasks. But why is it good? It's not just good for learning. It's good because anybody feels they can do that and that. And once they've done those two things, they probably feel they can do that. And having done that, they can definitely do this. And then having done that, they can almost certainly do this. If you went straight to here, then children with low self-efficacy in your subject wouldn't be able to do it. So we're not just planning for learning now, we're planning for self-efficacy. You'll have seen this kind of question grid before as well. Low demand, high demand. But when we think about it from a self-efficacy point of view, what does or what is expects you to know the answer. But if you don't know the answer, or if you're not sure, you're not going to volunteer. But if you go to what could or what might, then I open it out much more. The child with low self-efficacy feels much more able to answer a question in this corner over here, or even in this whole row over here, or column over here, because it's not clear there's a right answer, and therefore they can get things wrong much more easily. So making learning dependent on effort and thinking, then, is something that we want. We want them to go step by step by step by step by step. And if we do that, then what we should do then is enable them to think that actually their success is dependent on their own efforts. And I'd like to start down in this bottom corner in the flexible internal. So in this table, internal, external means I'm going to blame someone else, or I'm going to blame myself for my success or non-success. And down here, I've got the idea of fixed intelligence. I'm good at it, I'm not good at it. And flexible intelligence, I can be good at it if I work hard enough. So if you look at the quotes in each, it gives you an example of why we might want to think in this way as teachers. So if I've got a fixed but internal attribution for my success, I simply say, I'm stupid, so I did badly. I'm not good at science, so I did badly. Or, I did brilliantly because I'm very clever. And you will have students in your school who sit in this box, a large number of them. Sometimes especially the high retainers, because they think they're good at something and they'll do well in it. If, on the other hand, you've got people with fixed view of intelligence, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, but blaming external factors, they may simply say, Mum, I didn't do well because the exam was too difficult. Or, if they think that they could have done well, the flexible though, that it was the teacher's fault or the school's fault, and I've heard this a lot from head teachers in the Middle East last week, they might say, I did badly because the teacher was rubbish, or I did well because the teacher was good. But do we want to land in any of those places? I would argue no. To get a positive school, I want our children to be down here. I did badly because I didn't work hard, or I did well because I worked hard. Why do I like that? I like it because it means that the student is positively engaged in their learning. It means that the student takes responsibility for their learning. It means the student feels ownership of their success, and therefore it means that I'll have a positive classroom. The girl in the library, she had ownership of her success. The boy focused on the teacher. He had ownership of his own success. If I work hard, if I focus hard, I will do well. And so let's just summarize briefly. So if we have students with high self-worth, high self-efficacy, if they attribute their success to internal factors, like effort, and if they have flexible views of their own intelligence, then those children will approach learning for learning's sake, and they will address and not avoid challenges. And that is going to give you that lovely positive environment you want in your classrooms, to learn for learning's sake, not to get the grade, not to show themselves as brilliant, simply because they love it. And those students will have mastery goals or learning goals. On the other hand, if you have students whose sole driver is external measures of success, like exam results, if their sole driver is making the teacher happy or making their parents happy, they're more likely to have fixed views of their own ability. I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, and see challenges and difficulties as threats. They're not going to volunteer answers in their classrooms. And those students have performance goals. And we can split those performance goals down into two types. Performance approach goals for that student earlier who was really self-confident, but who engages in learning to feel successful and competent. They get the reward from being seen as clever. They have performance approach goals. And for that poor student earlier who has low self-confidence, they're going to disengage from learning so that they're not seen as to fail. Often something attached to maybe 13-year-old boys. They don't want to be seen as a failure, and so they don't even try. The reason I've got the goal here is because it's goal theory, but actually in a World Cup, when a player volunteered to take a penalty at the end of the game, they could easily have had a performance approach goal. They were self-confident, and they wanted the cheers of the crowd. They wanted the crowd's adulation. The players who didn't volunteer to take a penalty, they were performance avoiding. They didn't want to fail, and therefore they didn't want to try. So let's do a little summary of where we've got to. What does it mean to foster a positive environment for students' learning? It means we should set tasks which give students experience of success, that show them that effort can improve performance, that have the right level of challenge, and which build ideas step by step and have opportunity for teachers to facilitate and to support. There should be cooperation. Students should help each other. They should work together, and they should build on each other's ideas in small groups and class discussion. And they should see the value in what they're learning, and your teacher should tell the students what that value is and that they're able to learn it. We should value struggle. We should ask students about the mistakes that they made, how they overcame them, and get those students to act as role models for each other. We should encourage students to recognize their progress, compare achievement with previous work, assess their own work, and give them frequent and detailed positive feedback. And we should give them a wide variety of school subjects and a variety of extracurricular activities and opportunities to maximize the chances they'll have opportunity to thrive. And if there's one thing to take away from today, it's this word, thrive, because that's really what we're talking about. If we've got thriving teachers, we'll have positive classrooms. If we've got thriving students, we'll have positive classrooms. And if I slim that down into 3 key points, positive students have high self-efficacy, flexible ideas about their ability, and believe that they control their own success. They have self-worth, they feel themselves to be competent and knowledgeable, and they're able to master ideas and challenges, and they work with and feel supported by their teachers and their peers. Now, if I take these things again, then I can relate them to one final theory, which is going to help us to move to the next step. And that's called self-efficacy theory, and it's by, or self-determination theory, sorry, and it's by Ryan and Deci from 2020. They said, for healthy development, individuals require support for basic psychological needs of autonomy, of competence, and relatedness. Now, autonomy is the top one. It's about being self-efficacious. It's about having those flexible ideas about ability. It's believing that you can be successful. Competence is the second one, to have self-worth, to feel themselves to be competent and knowledgeable and able to master ideas. And then finally, relatedness, to work with and feel supported by, to collaborate with their peers and teachers. And we saw that earlier, look, a sense of belonging and connection. If that doesn't show you a sense of belonging and connection, I don't know what does. And competence, a feeling of mastery, a sense that one can succeed and grow. The need for competence being best satisfied within well-structured environments that offer optimal challenges, positive feedback, and opportunities for growth. And the reason I put the girl back on screen and made her bigger is because this face says, A, I'm really trying, B, I believe I can do it, and C, this is a challenge which I can overcome. Just in that single face, she's got her lips pursed, she's focused and concentrating, and it's not academic. This isn't about learning facts or concepts. It's about learning a skill of dribbling in a football game. But again, look, that environment is well structured. The girls here are waiting their turn. The teacher over here is giving instruction. We have really tightly structured environment that allows that girl to succeed. Autonomy, a sense of initiative and ownership in one's actions. You spotted that earlier in the pictures, that sense that this work means something to me and that I can do it and it's mine. It's supported by experiences of interest and value, undermined by experiences of being externally controlled, whether by external rewards or punishments. And so, if we think about that external control, and then we think about those students who want the grades, and we think about your schools where you're simply talking about grades and attainment, you might be exerting external control that is destroying your children's autonomy. And if we satisfy those basic psychological needs, then we get that better intrinsic motivation and we get better engagement. And the way in which Ryan and Deci tried to spread this out to give you a sense of how this works is that they said intrinsic motivation here, extrinsic here, and a motivation or no motivation here. So the children in your class who don't actually do anything and are so unmotivated you can't deal with them, it's because they don't feel themselves to be competent, it's because they don't see any value in the work you're giving them, and they don't see it as relevant to them in any way. But the children who you know love learning for learning's sake, over here are interested in the topic, they enjoy the classes, and they're inherently satisfied by them. So this is our student we want to aspire to, I think. But then we've got the students in the middle. So we've got the ones just next to a motivation, who just do things because they're being controlled. They do it to be compliant. I'm going to get a detention, I'll do the work. I want a grade A, I'll do the work. And that focus on that grade, that ego involvement, moves us into this next column. I want to be seen as clever, so I'll do the work. It will satisfy my ego. I want the teacher to like me, so I'll do the work. It satisfies that sense, the need for approval. And then the final column here, I want to go and do medicine, so I'll take chemistry. That was me. I didn't like chemistry, but I needed it because I wanted to go and do medicine. I didn't in the end, by the way, but I wanted to. So I've got a valuing of the activity, valuing of chemistry for me, even though I didn't like it, and self-endorsement of goals. So for biology, I was here because I was interested, I enjoyed it, I was inherently satisfied by it. It was my raison d'etre. But for chemistry, I was here. I needed it for my career, and that's why I did it. Hopefully, I was never over here, or at least I don't think so. So let's go back now and think about those signs of engagement from earlier. So if we see those signs of a positive classroom that are linked to behavioural engagement, then really we're looking for that active participation in class. In this column, we won't have any, because they're amotivated. In these columns, then we will see behavioural engagement, maybe more so as we come to this side, but it will be across the piece. If we think about cognitive engagement, then we've got personal investment, which is here. We've got taking responsibility for our own learning, which is probably around here. And we've got a commitment to mastery learning, which is here. So if we focus and bring our motivation to this side of the table, we get a lot of cognitively engaged students. Oh, back one, I think. Yeah. And then emotional engagement, including enjoyment, support, belonging, and attitudes towards teachers, peers, and learning. We've got enjoyment here. We've got attitudes, personal importance, interest here. And we've got those attitudes to learning here. So I think, again, for emotional engagement, we're sitting around this bit of the table. There's one thing I haven't told you. That in this table, the way you get to here is by increasing autonomy. So if we focus on increasing our children's autonomy, then we will get better motivation, we will get better engagement, and we'll get more positive classrooms. And more research says this to us. So if we have more effort, more behavioural engagement, more cognitive engagement are all tied together. If children feel more competent, they'll have more self-esteem, they'll have less stress, their well-being will be better, and more emotional engagement. And as students become more autonomous, their exam results will get better. And I think this is really quite an interesting one. This research has been around for a very long time. If we build students' autonomy, if we bring them to this side of a motivation table, then their exam results will improve. Their effort goes up, they feel more competent, they're less stressed, they've got better well-being, they've got more emotional engagement. So as a strategy for making almost everything right in our schools, a focus on autonomy is the right way to go. And if we get our teachers to be what's called autonomy supportive, then they usually also build those other two psychological needs, competence and relatedness as well. So how can we do it? Well, there's a number of different ways that come from research. And I'll just go back there and show you the research papers that it comes from. So number one, understand, acknowledge, be responsive to students' interests and perspectives. Give students a chance to take ownership of their schoolwork. Give them tasks that engage their interests and in which they see value. Provide a rationale for learning activities. Help students to see those activities as relevant. Offer students choice. Increase their ownership of activities. Increase their performance and curiosity. Respond to students' questions, but resist giving immediate answers, instead prompting students to reach the answer themselves. And I think we all know that last one is a sign of good teaching and learning. But actually that last one is influencing children's learning through building their autonomy. And then finally, listen to students more and talk less. Give fewer direct instructions. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk as a teacher, but it means that The focus is on that learner again and building the autonomy in that learner. Sometimes when I say this, head teachers say to me, yes, but you can't just give the whole control to students, and that is right. Because it's not about permissiveness, but it's about helping to catalyze students' willingness to engage in learning through well-organized learning environments. Those environments need clear goals. Children need to be accountable for the autonomous work they're doing. They need consistent rules and guidance. You can't just put students in a group and expect them to work well unless you tell them what's expected. And hence they need those clear expectations. But you also need to value what they're doing. You need to give them positive feedback, and you need to give them appropriate challenge, again, to foster that sense that they're, I'm going to go back to the cognitive scientist phrase, the desirable difficulty, which keeps them just suitably and optimally engaged. And if you don't do this, then actually you get a problem. And Yu et al. In 2016, they said, if you don't foster autonomy, then you end up with students who have anxiety and depression, lower self-worth, lower well-being, they avoid challenges, they have fixed ideas of intelligence, and they fear failure, and they adopt performance-avoid goals. Now, I know in your schools that these children exist, and I know in our schools that these children exist, much more so in the last 10 years. I know my daughter is a child who focuses on approval from others and who focuses on the grade rather than learning intrinsically. I think that's partly a product of the pandemic because things were so worrying to her that she worried she wouldn't get to university, and so she just focused on the grade. But we're not through the pandemic yet. It's still here, but we're in the very late stages of it. And it's time we shifted that narrative now towards students becoming that much more positive. Ooh, be closer. There. So, quick recap. Positive classrooms are classrooms where students are behaviorally, cognitively, and socially engaged. Engagement is a product of students' motivation. Students' motivation becomes more intrinsic and engagement more positive if teachers build students' autonomy, perceived competence, and relatedness. And if teachers use autonomy-supportive class strategies in the classroom, then it will lead to greater autonomy, perceived competence, and relatedness. So that bit there is where your teachers can have impact. Now, because we're slightly behind, I'm just going to skip through the case studies. One more. There we are. And then I want to talk about you as school leaders and the way in which you make policy can impact. So number one, the effect of grades on student engagement. It develops performance goals, we've talked about it. It develops performance approach goals for ego, so my daughter will work hard to get a grade. But it also develops performance avoid goals to avoid shame. It fosters a desire to outcompete, particularly in boys, in order to satisfy their own egos and in order to help them compare their grades with others. And what that means is that the grade is controlling their engagement. The grade is controlling their performance, and therefore, it doesn't increase their autonomy. In fact, it reduces the autonomy that they have. That gives you less engagement and less positive students. And we can see that in the research. So Gronick and Ryan, looking at the effect of grades on student engagement, say it gets lower intrinsic motivation and therefore lower conceptual learning. Clapp in 2015, the impact of grades is to actually make attainment go down. If we only focus on students' grades, attainment gets lower. And Butler in 1987, a long time ago, if you have lower autonomy, then especially for high attainers, your sense of that autonomous sense in your students will reduce. I think these two are quite interesting. So Kriegsmann, less intrinsic motivation, more amotivation, and more fear of failure. So more likely to get that sad girl from earlier. But look at this one. In 2011, a long time ago, even expecting to be graded led to students being less autonomous. and more likely, therefore, to adopt performance avoid goals. So let's go back to the start, remember. We're talking about positive classrooms and positive students. If our focus is entirely on grades, we're less likely to have positive classrooms and positive students. And then finally, for you, if you're giving your teachers extrinsic and controlling measures of success, their students have to get a certain number of grades for the teacher to get paid well. If you're giving your students those controlling incentives, if all your conversation is around grades and test scores, then your students and your teachers will only focus on what needs to be examined and only focus on memorizing what needs to be examined. Activities that are interesting, enjoyable, engaging, or valued by students are dropped. And let's go back to that slide with the football on, with the chess on, with the boy with the painted face on. All of those things go if the only narrative is around grades. And what that does, again, is it reduces students' intrinsic motivation, and it reduces their autonomy, and the research tells us it reduces their grades. Okay, finally, I want to think about teachers, because teachers also have these needs. They need to feel competent, they need to feel autonomous, and they need to feel related. When I interview new teachers, which I'm doing right now at the moment, then I say, why do you want to be a teacher? They say to me, because I love working with children. And that sits in this column here. Some of them say to me, because it's really important that children learn science, and I want to pass on my knowledge of science to the next generation, because of climate change, because of a pandemic, because of all of the other reasons that we can think of. They don't say, because I want students to get good grades. I've never heard a new teacher tell me that. They don't say, because I want to give detentions, or because I want to give a student a good test score. That is not their motivation, and yet they land in a system where it appears the function and the purpose is just grades. Now, if we take our own, well, let's do a little step in between. The worst context, and yes, I am going to say it that strongly, the worst context is where school leaders like you are so focused on grades that they tell the teachers what to teach and how to teach it. To the extent that in some schools in England now, you get presented with a scripted lesson that even tells you what to say. Now, I'm so pleased that some of you are looking with disbelief at me, because if we want to foster teachers' autonomy, then doing that is going to destroy it. If we want to foster teachers' intrinsic motivation, let's go back to that one, then focusing on grades and taking away any sense that they've got autonomy, look at the arrow, is going to destroy that autonomy. And we're going to end up not having any teachers left in our profession. Because if we take that autonomy away, we get lower perceived competence, more emotional exhaustion, less sense of accomplishment, lower vitality, more exhaustion. That's the impact on teachers. If they don't have enough autonomy, it has negative impact. If they have more autonomy, it has positive impact, more intrinsic motivation, better psychological wellness, less stress, work stress, and more job satisfaction. But don't forget, it's not about permissiveness. This isn't about saying to teachers, off you go, do what you like. It's about having clear goals. It's about framing their autonomy in consistent rules and guidance. It's about having clear expectations for teachers and their students. It's about giving positive feedback to teachers, which helps them get better. And it's about giving them appropriate challenge. For example, not giving the young teacher the most difficult groups to teach. What we know is that if you as school leaders try to increase teachers' autonomy, then their autonomy will increase. We know that teacher autonomy reduces because of negative pressures from above, so accountability policies, particularly around grades. Why aren't your students getting good enough grades, for example? And below, from disruptive students and expectations of parents. Each of these things takes away autonomy. And people have got so interested in this that back in February 2022, this headline appeared in the Times Educational Supplement. And this reported on a study by a researcher from UCL. His findings were as follows. If you want to support teacher autonomy, then you must make sure your teachers understand and contribute to the building of whole school initiatives. So do not do those initiatives to your teachers, but enable them to be part of those initiatives. I know you have school development plans. I know you have owners. Some of you are owners. I know that there's pressures from all sides, from parents, etc. But if you forget the teachers in this game, then you will get rid of their autonomy and you will get rid of them eventually. What we want to do is reduce the extent to which teachers are doing things for your approval, and we want to reduce the extent to which they're trying to avoid sanctions simply by complying with the initiatives. We want them to feel part of those initiatives. We also want to ensure that whole school strategies are evidence-based and that teachers are critically engaged with that evidence so they can understand the reasoning behind them. So it's not just you as a school leader who thinks something is good, it shows you've thought about it and you can bring them into your thinking. Even if they don't agree, they'll respect that thinking sufficiently well. We want to build their own critical reflection. For example, by engaging them in their own research. Some of the PDQ work does that. Because if they can think critically about what's happening in their school, then you and they can work together on those whole school initiatives. One of my former master's students did her master's on an initiative that the head of department had brought in. She found it to be wholly valueless. And she showed it to her head of department, and her head of department scrapped it because she was a good leader and she listened to the people underneath her and she gave them that autonomy to contribute. Give teachers agency over their own professional development, both goals and ways in which to address those goals. PD should not just depend on the school development plan. And then give teachers autonomy in their lesson planning. Give them support. Give them a medium-term plan to work too. But let's not go to scripted lessons in Pakistan, please. Because this is a country that values education in its holistic sense. Now, this is all from a researcher called Sam Sims at UCL. I should say to you, this is research done in England. And so you must take it and take what you think is relevant to Pakistan from it. It doesn't necessarily all apply in Pakistan. But I think what it says to us is that autonomy is important and that there are various simple, straightforward ways in which school leaders like you can foster your teachers' autonomy without losing too much control yourselves. Why else is teacher autonomy important? If teachers are more autonomous, students are more autonomous. If teachers become less autonomous, they support students' autonomy less. If teachers are more autonomous, they have more autonomy support for students. So, finally, key messages with 50 seconds to go. Phew, I was a bit worried. Number one, positive classrooms need positive students and positive teachers. Number two, positive students and positive teachers have high behavioural, cognitive, and emotional engagement in their roles. Number three, engagement is a product of motivation. There are lots of ways of thinking about motivation, all of which can be useful: self-efficacy, self-worth, self-determination. And supporting students and teachers' psychological needs, in particular autonomy, leads to greater engagement. And therefore, supporting students and teachers' psychological needs, in particular autonomy, leads to more positive learning environments in every classroom. And what that generates is positive teachers, positive students, and positive classrooms. 50 minutes. There. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but if we don't, then you can ask me at coffee. I'll look to somebody else for that.
So we have 5 minutes for Q&A. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you.
Good morning and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for this, wonderful exchange of ideas that you did through the picture especially. You had shown some slides regarding case studies. It would be very interesting if we could go on to one case study and take it up as an example for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look. So we'll go back. Oh, can we go back to the presentation and go to the case study slides? So these wonderful people here are in control of the slides. Great, okay, I'll navigate to them. Or you can keep going forwards. I'll keep pressing forwards. Keep going, 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 nearly there, keep going, 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 oh, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, we're nearly there, and then one more, I think, or maybe a couple more, just after the summary. Almost there. Oh, maybe after self-determination for even. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. We're nearly there, madam. Keep going, keep going. That was harder than we thought to get there, wasn't it? 2 minutes
of our time.
Well, it'll be the whole left, but by the end of the 5 minutes by the time we reach the slide, you're right. We're nearly there now. And yeah, let's do the first one so we don't have to go any further. So, Alma is a 12-year-old. She's an average student in most subjects. She's doing poorly in science. Tests are often handed in with many unanswered questions. Sometimes correct answers had been written but were erased. Alma occasionally spends science lessons in the sick bay, claiming headache, stomachache, or other ailment that disappears after the science lesson's finished. Okay, I'm just going to do the first paragraph. So let's look at it. She's an average student in most subjects, so she doesn't get that ego involvement because she's simply average across the board. And she's doing poorly in science. So this is not one of our top students who wins the awards. This is somebody bang on in the middle. She gets very little ego satisfaction. She hands in tests with many unanswered questions. Now, either she doesn't know the answers, that's a possibility, or can't work them out, or she's afraid and she's performance avoiding. She doesn't want to answer because she doesn't want to feel shame. And we know that because sometimes she writes correct answers, but she rubs them out because she's uncertain and she'd rather write nothing than write something that could be wrong. Now, I know you have those students in your classes. I have those students in my new teachers. I had a student last year who wouldn't hand in her essay until the final point, after she'd already officially failed through non-submission. She had one last chance. It was only then she'd hand it in, because it was the last chance. Before that, she was scared of showing it to me for fear of what I might think about her, which I think was, it's terrible as a teacher to feel that someone feels that. She occasionally spends science lessons in the sick bay, and that because she's got a headache, and then when science is finished, she comes back. That's not because she's deliberately trying to truant, just for the sake of it. That's because she doesn't feel confident. She doesn't feel self-efficacious. She doesn't feel like she wants to be put on the spot in science, and therefore wants to avoid the possibility of being asked anything or being seen to fail. And so it's easier to pretend to be ill and go to the sick bay than it is to be in those lessons, trying and failing throughout. Now, shifting her and shifting her motivation is a really tricky thing. But if we just think to a couple of the things that we saw earlier on, if we ask questions like, what might instead of what is, and why could instead of why does, we open that space up to her much better to make her feel that she can try and to make her feel that she's not going to be ridiculed or be told she's wrong, or lose her motivation, or lose her self-worth as part of the lessons themselves. So we need to think together, if you like, with our students about how we build Alma's autonomy in that science lesson so that she can then at least feel that she doesn't have to avoid performing, at least feel that she's got some self-worth in science, or some self-efficacy in science, and that she has some self-worth. I'm going to stop because I was told we had 5 minutes after, and that's the end of a 5. We can do some more later at coffee if you like, that'd be fine. But thank you very much. I'll come and sit down and let somebody else take over.